For over 3,000 years, no one knew this place even existed. And then, out of nowhere, archaeologists digging near Alexandria uncovered something absolutely shocking: a forgotten Egyptian city. This place is buried under Greek ruins, hiding secrets that could rewrite the history of pharaohs and their armies. And one of the artifacts, which looks like a simple wine jug, changed everything. We thought that we already placed all the important parts on the map of ancient Egypt: pyramids, Thebes, Luxor, Alexandria. But nope, the map just got an update. The new city was a big deal, and it's about 3,400 years old. It's just been discovered at the site called Kom el Nugus. This place is located west of Alexandria and tucked between the Mediterranean and a saltwater lake called Lake Mariut. This discovery raised a few eyebrows. Scientists thought that this place used to be empty and that it was only settled by the Greeks in about 332 BCE. But it turns out that people lived in Kom el Nugus way before that. When archaeologists were digging through Greek ruins, they started noticing something unexpected: mud brick walls. Yep, you know, the pyramid type. That's the kind Egyptians built during the New Kingdom. These mud bricks were made from mud, clay, sand, and straw. These ingredients were mixed with water and dried in the sun, not baked. Egyptians used them for thousands of years to build houses, temples, palaces, and yes, the pyramids. Of course, other civilizations did use mud brick too, but Egyptian mud brick is kinda quirky. They used straw that grew in their regions, layout styles, and mortar. That's what helped the experts realize that Egyptians used to hang out in Kom el Nugus. That alone raised eyebrows, and then they found more. An entire street layout, buried structures, and even a temple built by Ramses the Great himself. His name speaks for itself. This guy was one of the most famous pharaohs in all of Egyptian history. He ruled ancient Egypt for 60 years, fought huge battles, and just loved building tons of stuff like that temple. People loved him so much that later pharaohs literally pretended to be him or wrote his name on their buildings. That's when archaeologists realized that they weren't looking at some dusty mud bricks of a tiny village. That's an entire buried city. They immediately started digging more. Turns out the whole place wasn't random. It was built with great care. The streets had drains to stop rainwater from damaging the soft mud-brick walls. There were also small tomb chapels with writings about soldiers. This suggests this place might have been the military base, and that changes a lot. In ancient Egypt, when the military showed up, there must have been a reason. So what was it? Protection? Conquest? Control of something important? In the case of this city, it was probably about wine, water, and trade on the edge of the desert. What's even crazier is that we still don't know just how big it was. The team has only uncovered part of it so far. There could be fortifications, warehouses, administrative buildings, or even more religious or royal structures waiting underground. We also don't know what this town was called in ancient times. That name is still buried. But it might be uncovered someday, maybe inside a wall, maybe on a scroll, maybe on another broken jug. One of those already turned out to be a mind-blower. A chunk of a ceramic jar, called an amphora, had a royal seal pressed into it, and that seal bore the name Meredaton. Princess Meredaton wasn't just anyone. She was the eldest daughter of Queen Nefertiti and the older sister of King Tutankhamun. Yes, that's right. Both Nefertiti and King Tut were involved here. All that was about a century before Ramses the Great built one of his temples here. Looks like the city was founded back in the days of another pharaoh, the pharaoh Akhenaten, husband of Queen Nefertiti, father of Princess Meredaton, and future king Tutankhamun. That guy, Akhenaten, was a bit of a wild card. He was the type who really gets weird about one of his interests. He tried to completely change Egypt's religion, forcing everyone to worship the sun disk called Aten instead of the usual deities. He basically told all Egypt that all their mythology was wrong, and from now on, there will be no more Osiris, no more Thoth or Set. Just raw sunlight only, people. That's known in history as the Amarna period. And he went all in, changed his name, built an entirely new capital city called Amarna in the middle of the desert, redesigned temples, rewrote hymns, and even banned traditional religious imagery. Even the art got wild at the time. People started getting elongated heads, belly rolls, and all that humanity and vulnerability carved into stone. It was deliberately weird. He wanted to show the family not as perfect gods, but as human vessels of divine light. Everyone had to awkwardly smile and play along because he was the pharaoh after all. The wackiest part is that after his rule, his son, Tutankhamun, reversed all the sun disk-related stuff. He literally changed his name from Tutankhaten, which means living image of the Aten, the sun disk, to Tutankhamun, which means living image of Amun, one of the great older deities. King Tut brought back the old deities, reopened the temples, and erased as much of Akhenaten's legacy as possible. Looks like his family didn't really like the sun cult after all. Meanwhile, this discovered wine jug shows that the city was probably active, thriving with life during Akhenaten's times. That's huge. Up until now, there was no clear evidence that his radical ideas and projects extended all the way to the north. The jug also shows that vineyards and wine production reached all the way to the north in ancient Egypt. Wine really was a huge deal, worthy of placing a military base here. Princess Meritatan most likely used this jug. Just like with her brother, she was born into the sun and named after it. Her name, also spelled Meritatan, meant beloved of the Aten. As the eldest daughter of Pharaoh and his queen, born right into the middle of radical religious changes, she was raised to perform the future queen's duties. From her earliest years, she walked in temples alongside her mother Nefertiti, shaking the sistrum in solemn rituals. She was there when Akhenaten established his capital city, Amarna. He clearly loved his family. Meritatan's face was etched into its stone walls more than anyone else. In every temple, in every sacred scene, her figure appears, revered. Things get foggy in history after her father passed away. The throne wobbled. King Tut was very young, only 9 years old when he had to take new duties. Meritatan seemed to have been a brief step between her father and her younger brother. She married someone called Smenkhkare. History isn't even sure who that mysterious man was. Could have been a puppet, a phantom king in a crumbling dynasty. May have even been her brother. Whatever the truth was, these two took power and ruled together for a while. Meritatan got the title of the Great Royal Wife, a title of immense power. But Smenkhkare was a very short-lived ruler. He passed away just in about a year. There are some speculations among historians that Meritatan was the actual ruler, the informal female pharaoh, because her brother was too young. Some theories say that she raised Tutankhamun and became a sort of queen regent, mentoring the child who would be used to restore the old order. But all this is unconfirmed. It's very hard for historians to find information about that time because the Amarna period was later condemned. The successors wanted to wipe away Akhenaten's heresy and everything attached to it. This included Meritanaten. So even if she ruled, even if she mothered Tut, they tried to bury her in the sands of history. In any case, perhaps this new uncovered city will tell us more about the mysteries of the Amarna period, one of the most chaotic periods of ancient Egypt. Scientists have discovered a never-before-seen pyramid immersed in the sands of Judea. After a little digging, they discovered that it held treasures that had been untouched for over 2 millennia and historical secrets that we can only now access. At the Zohar Fortress site, 2,600 feet above the Dead Sea, archaeologists were searching for manuscripts that would provide new information about the history of the site. The excavation was originally part of a long-standing campaign launched by the authorities. Its goal was to protect the sites from looting and unauthorized excavations. What they didn't expect was to find a pyramid-shaped structure built on top of a hill, made of hand-cut stones, each weighing hundreds of pounds. At first, the experts thought it was just a tomb, but they soon noticed the shape of the original walls and understood that the mound was a construction. They immediately realized that someone had dug into the top of the structure, probably looters who had spotted something valuable there. Luckily, most of the structure was still buried in sand, so the most valuable finds were hidden from sight. In the first week of excavation, volunteers found fragments of papyrus, bronze vases, and even ancient furniture, which were exceptionally well preserved. The desert climate had been a great ally in preserving those artifacts over the millennia. With little humidity in the air, mold cannot form, so organic materials such as wood and fibers are protected from cracking and deformation. Hypotheses suggested that the pyramid had been built during the First Temple period. However, new discoveries have shown that it's more recent, from the Hellenistic period. Considering this and the fact that the structure dates back 2,200 years, it's believed that it probably appeared shortly after the death of Alexander the Great, the famous ancient Greek king of Macedonia. At that time, his generals divided the former Seleucid Empire. Ptolemy took control of Egypt and the surrounding regions, including the Dead Sea area, while Seleucus took control of the north, which is now part of the Middle East. It's still not known for sure whether the pyramid was built under the rule of the Ptolemaics or the Seleucids. Both Ptolemaic coins and coins from the Seleucid kingdom have been found at the site. Even so, many scholars believe it was built when the region was under Ptolemaic control. Evidence also suggests that the building, despite its longevity, collapsed at some point. But that's not why it was abandoned by the ancient Egyptians, which begs the question of what purpose it was built for. Some believe it was used as a tomb due to its picturesque location on top of a hill. Others believed it may have served as a historical monument. However, one of the strongest theories is that the pyramid was a guard tower, protecting an important trade route along which salt and bitumen resources from the Dead Sea were transported to coastal ports. They also believe it may have been used by Ptolemaic officials to collect taxes from travelers. It would be something equivalent to our modern-day toll booths, or even port inspection agencies. Although the contents of the papyrus documents remain a mystery, it seems very likely they were written using the Greek alphabet, and some experts believe that they may have been tax documents, which would make perfect sense, given the theory that the pyramid was a guard tower. The team calls it a fascinating historical mystery that the dig is helping to unravel, but the find is just a grain of sand in an entire desert. The dig is part of a larger project that's been going on for a long time, and in the last 8 years alone, it has scanned 111 miles of desert cliffs and identified approximately 900 caves within that radius. Using rappelling equipment, advanced technology, and specialized documentation methods, archaeologists discovered thousands of rare items, such as hidden scrolls, woodworking tools, carpets, leather goods, and even treasures. For them, the Judean desert is an ancient vault just waiting to be opened to reveal its secrets. A few years before they found the mysterious pyramid, they discovered a cave that had served as a refuge for Jewish rebels almost 1,900 years ago. The site was about 262 feet from the top of a cliff, and because of its difficult access, it hadn't been explored yet. Inside, they found previously unpublished fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls that contained religious passages written in Greek. 11 lines of text were reconstructed thanks to the good condition of the papyri. So, scientists were able to identify their etymological content. Probably the best thing, there was no problem with preservation. Thanks to the dry and hot conditions of the desert, the artifacts were in impeccable condition. And there were other historical treasures there. The teams found rare coins, a partially mummified skeleton over 6,000 years old, with skin, tendons, and even strands of hair. There was also a giant basket made of plant fibers, considered the oldest in the world, more than 10,000 years old. With a capacity of up to 26 gallons, it was made about 1,000 years before the invention of ceramics. Speaking of historical treasures, there's another one that has caught the attention of the scientific community. A small piece of fabric that is around 3,800 years old. But it's more than just simple fabric. dyed with the rare scarlet paint mentioned many times in ancient religious texts. This find is the oldest known evidence of fabric painted with a dye made from insects known as scarlet worms. This is where the intense red hue comes from. It was a highly valued color, like royal blue and purple, because those insects lived in oak trees and could only be harvested for a short period during the year. So, those dyes were reserved for sacred fabrics, such as priests' clothes, marking status and religious importance. And although this discovery had great significance for archaeology, its size was actually tiny, measuring less than 1 inch. The fragment was discovered in 2016 during excavations in the so-called Cave of Skulls, but it's not known exactly how this fabric got there. According to experts, it's evidence that people knew how to dye wool fibers already 3,800 years ago or so. It also provides us with proof that the ancient textile industry already used animals at about the same time people began to create written sources. Fabrics painted using this type of dye were recorded in more recent periods. But what makes this piece really special is the fact that it is much older than any other. Another important discovery was made in 1980, when scientists found a seed that was over 1,000 years old, which turned into a mysterious tree named Sheba. They spent 14 years cultivating this plant, which is now about 10 feet tall, only to discover later that it could belong to an extinct lineage of trees that had grown in the region. The seed dates back to a period between 993 and 1202 CE, and they believe that Sheba may be a biblical tree commonly associated with healing. Although it's not been possible to identify the exact species, since the tree hasn't flowered, we know that it belongs to the genus Commiphora, which is related to famous African plants, such as the myrrh tree. But time has revealed something even more special. Its leaves and resins are rich in compounds that have medicinal, antioxidant, and even skin-soothing properties. This means that the tree may represent a forgotten lineage whose resin had medicinal value and was mentioned in ancient texts. This brings to light how ancient people dealt with botanical medicine. Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the valley temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the valley temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the valley temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it. And we're only just beginning to catch up.
If there's a question that still baffles archaeologists to this day, it's this one. How did the ancient Egyptians build those magnificent pyramids? As far as we know today, their resources were quite limited, especially in terms of tools and building materials. We still don't have a fully satisfying answer, but hey, we've got some pretty amazing theories worth considering. The leading contender among these theories involves the clever Egyptians employing a sneaky strategy. Now picture this. They constructed a slanted and curving mound made of bricks, earth, and sand encircling the pyramid to be. As the pyramid grew taller and taller, they simply increased the height and length of this wacky structure. It's like they were playing an ancient game of Jenga. Now, how did they get those massive stone blocks up there? Well, according to the legendary ancient Greek historian Herodotus, they used sleds, rollers, and levers. It sounds like they turned construction into a supersized game of tug-of-war. And guess what? Herodotus also claimed that the Great Pyramid, the one from Giza, the granddaddy of them all, took a whopping 20 years to build. There's more. Herodotus also dropped a mind-boggling number on us. 100,000 men were supposedly involved in this pyramid extravaganza. Did they hire the entire Egyptian population? Well, it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. These men were probably mostly farmers, so they probably focused on the pyramids when there wasn't much work to be done in the fields. Like during the flood season of the Nile River. Obviously, specialists in the archaeological community had something to add to this theory. By the late 20th century, they discovered some evidence that suggests the workforce might have been smaller and more permanent than previously thought. Instead of a massive army of 100,000 pyramid builders, they proposed that a modest crew of around 20,000 workers, accompanied by support personnel like bakers, physicians, and even spiritual leaders, could have gotten the job done. There was also this theory that claimed that the pyramids were actually built from the top downward. It suggested that these colossal structures were nothing more than isolated hills used as quarries. The stones were supposedly drawn from these hills, and over time, competing engineers took charge and transformed them into the iconic pyramids we know today. Now, before you dismiss this theory as a wild fantasy, some folks thought it wasn't completely crazy. After all, there are instances where isolated hills exist, so maybe this theory had a tiny glimmer of truth. Whether it involved ramp building or ingenious work schedules, one thing is clear. Those pyramids have definitely left their mark on history and on our imaginations. Now, speaking of ancient Egyptian mysteries, there's this gigantic unfinished obelisk sitting in ancient Egypt, and scientists are trying to figure out how it was shaped. Now, some people suggest that our industrious ancestors used handheld pounders to get the job done. One expert has a different take on the matter, though. He argues that if we take a closer look at the pattern left behind by the shaping tool, we'll notice something peculiar. The walls of the trenches surrounding the obelisk display a neat and even pattern, which is pretty unlikely if they were pounded away by mere mortal hands. According to this expert, those horizontal striations are usually the result of a tool that takes breaks while removing material, leaving its mark on the surface. But wait, there's more. Imagine the tool being rocked back and forth against the trench walls, clearing away the waste to keep the trench from narrowing. Well, in that case, the tool might have left some funky horizontal striations where it was pressed against the sidewall. This sounds like some fancy technology at play, don't you think? And guess what? The dynastic Egyptians probably didn't have access to that kind of know-how. Another famous Egyptologist from way back also uncovered a bunch of core drills during his adventures. Although the actual drill bits are missing, his collection houses these particular core remnants made of limestone, alabaster, and even granite. These constructions aren't the only amazing thing the ancient Egyptians left behind, though. As it turns out, the Egyptians were the genius minds behind the creation of the handheld mirror. Yeah, that little mirror you use every day to check yourself out. But here's the twist. These mirrors are like pieces of art. They were decorated with inscriptions and figures. But that's not all. The Egyptians had a serious concern with their appearance. They knew the importance of personal hygiene and looking fabulous. So, in their quest for pearly whites, they invented toothbrushes and toothpaste. Dental problems were pretty common back then, and their smiles weren't exactly all white. Dentistry wasn't their strongest suit, you see. Maybe their minds were distracted by all that pyramid building. So that doesn't mean those ancient toothpaste recipes weren't amazing. One delightful concoction included rock salt, mint, dried iris petals, and pepper. Some brave dentists in the 21st century tried it out, and it worked pretty well. Ground-up ash was also used in another recipe to create a tooth cleansing paste. Mint was missing, so that didn't do much for their breath. That's when the genius Egyptians came up with the world's first breath mints. They made tablets from heated spices like cinnamon, and they mixed it with honey. Now, let's shift gears to home decor, Egyptian style. They surely took ornamentation to the next level. While the concept of decorating furniture started in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians cranked it up a notch. They went all out with different colors of ink and even developed various weights of paper. Oh, and let's not forget about those cute little area rugs we all have in our homes today. Guess who came up with the idea? Yep, the Egyptians. They used the versatile papyrus plant to make those cozy rugs. And speaking of trends, the Egyptians loved their knickknacks. They had an assortment of small figurines in the shapes of cats, dogs, and people. These statues were made from various materials, like simple sun-dried mud to the ultimate bling of gold. It all depended on how loaded you were. The Egyptians were also all about farming, and they knew that clean water was crucial for their crops and animals. That's why they came up with some nifty inventions and techniques to make sure their land was fertile and their plants were happy. First off, they had the genius idea of using ox-drawn plows. They had two types of plows, heavy and light. The heavy plow would strut its stuff, cutting deep furrows in the soil, while the lighter plow followed behind, fluffing up the earth. But they didn't stop there. After plowing, the Egyptians would break up clumps of soil and sow the rows with seeds. To give those seeds a good old squish into the furrows, they'd march their livestock across the field, effectively closing up the furrows. But hey, all that hard work would be pointless if their seeds were as dry as the Sahara. That's where irrigation comes into play. The Egyptians were so good at it that other cultures, like the Greeks and Romans, couldn't help but copy their techniques. Now let's switch gears and talk about the marvelous architecture of ancient Egypt. These folks weren't just skilled farmers, they were also architectural maestros. They built these fancy canals to carry water to farms and villages, and boy, did they know how to make those canals look pretty. Just imagine strolling along a canal lined with ornate structures. The pharaoh Ramesses the Great was quite the overachiever when it came to construction. One of his mind-blowing creations was the construction located at Abu Simbel. This building was designed so that twice a year, the sun would shine directly into it and illuminate the statues of Ramesses. And let's not forget about the corbelled arch. Without this architectural gem, we'd be missing out on some mind-boggling structures like the Great Pyramid. The Egyptians knew how to make things stand tall and proud, thanks to their engineering and construction wizardry. They built grand halls and inner sanctums that make your jaw drop, and some of these temples doubled as astronomical observatories. Secant, cosine, tangent, sine, 3.14159. Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think? But wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there. As a man walks past you with a bucket of paint, he's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid. And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a great pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on, and that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Trans-America Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas.
In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the Sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapeum of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapeum was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision, with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. If a bull had these signs, they believed it was chosen by Ptah and treated it like royalty. The chosen bulls lived in a special temple in Memphis, the city where they worshipped Ptah. They received the best care and offerings from visitors who wanted their blessings. When an Apis bull passed away, it was treated with great honor and mummified. When Mariette entered the Serapeum, he noticed traces of rollers on the gallery's floor and found 2 wooden horizontal winches. Each had 8 levers. Later, other explorers saw double rails. The burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor. To get the boxes into place, workers filled the chambers with sand so the sarcophagi could be rolled in straight. Then they slowly removed the sand to gently lower the boxes into perfectly cut spaces in the bedrock. A carved stone sign found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days to move just one sarcophagus and its lid into its spot during the time of Ptolemy II. The extreme precision of the sarcophagi with 90-degree angles also has an explanation. Ancient Egyptians wrote texts, or rather, papyrus, on geometry a long time ago. It shows that they knew the approximate number pi and could calculate the volume of a pyramid with its top cut off. If they could figure out complicated math like that back then, it makes sense that they could also carve perfectly flat surfaces 500 years later. All this sounds pretty legit, but some people think certain things don't add up here. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapeum are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed, so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the serapeum in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids. So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Mariette discovered in the 1850s. They opened the serapeum for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Cheneta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car.
It turns out the Great Pyramid of Giza might be way older than we think, like over 20,000 years old. That's older than farming or written language. But then, who built such astonishing monuments? Were those even human? Italian researcher Alberto Donini based his idea on something called the relative erosion method. In short, you look at how stone wears down over time and say, yeah, this kind of damage would take way longer than a few thousand years. But before we dive deeper, here's a quick refresher on the pyramids themselves. The pyramids of Giza are some of the oldest giant stone structures ever made by humans. 2 of them are still the tallest pyramids ever built in the ancient world, and the Great Pyramid of Khufu is the tallest of the 3. There's one more reason why that Great Pyramid is special. It's the only one of the original 7 wonders of the ancient world that's still standing today. Now, these pyramids weren't built in one sudden aha moment. A lot of people over many generations worked on them, and you can see their progress over time. Early pyramids have mistakes, weird angles, and structural issues. As for the later ones, they get cleaner and more efficient. It looks like the builders were slowly figuring things out. Each generation solved new engineering problems and got better at it. It's like updates to a smartphone. Each new version is smoother and more advanced. This brings us to the big questions. How old are the pyramids? And who built them? Oh, and how on earth did people move and stack stones that weigh as much as trucks without modern machines? Well, so far we have pretty solid evidence for the general timeline and the workers involved in the process. But the exact construction methods are still debated. And that's why claims like this 20,000-year-old pyramid idea get so popular. Most historians stick with the traditional dating, around 4,500 years old. Now let's get back to the relative erosion method. Wind, rain, heat, cold, they all slowly eat away at rock. And the longer a stone sits outside, the more damage it collects. Like how an old sidewalk looks way rougher than a brand new one. And the Great Pyramid wasn't always rough and blocky. It used to be wrapped in smooth white limestone. But after a big earthquake in the year 1303, Egyptians pulled off the outer stones and used them to rebuild Cairo. That's why parts of the pyramid have only been exposed to the weather for about 675 years. At the base of the pyramid, there's a limestone pavement. Some of it was hidden under those casing stones for thousands of years and only got exposed after they were removed. Right next to it, there's pavement made of the same stone, but it has been exposed since the day the pyramid was built. These different amounts of time in the open turn the pyramid into a natural stopwatch. Basically, Donnini looked at two parts of the same stone, asking a simple question. If this much damage happened in 675 years, how long would it take to make that much damage? To get the answer, he didn't examine just one spot. He checked 12 different places around the pyramid, because stone doesn't wear down evenly everywhere. Some areas get more wind, others are exposed to more sun, and some may have tiny cracks that speed things up. Because of that, the numbers he got were very different. Some spots made the pyramid seem pretty young. Other spots made it seem crazy old. So instead of picking one number, he averaged them all together. And when he did that, the average came out to around 25,000 years old. If that estimate is even a bit close, it would mean the pyramid was built way earlier than we think, somewhere around 2300 BCE. Now, Donnini doesn't claim this is an exact date. According to his analysis, there's a strong chance that the pyramid is much older than traditionally believed, but it's not a guarantee. So, it's no wonder that a lot of experts strongly disagree with this theory, which makes it controversial. Now, that's a great thing about science. It's based on facts, not whatever is popular at the time. But let's sneak a peek inside these mysterious ancient pyramids. The Great Pyramid is the oldest of the three famous pyramids of Giza, and it's also the biggest. It was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, who ruled during Egypt's 4th dynasty. If you've ever heard the name Cheops, that's just the Greek version of Khufu's name. Basically, same guy, like Robert versus Bob. Right next to the Great Pyramid, there are two more large pyramids. Those weren't some random projects, they were built for Khufu's family. All three were constructed during Egypt's Old Kingdom, spread out over 3 generations of rulers. We really can't pin down the exact dates because we don't have enough evidence. Historians have to piece the whole story together with the help of ancient records, inscriptions, and radiocarbon dating, like assembling a timeline from half-burned notes and faded receipts. One big mystery is whether each pharaoh lived long enough to see their pyramid finished. These projects were massive and took years, even decades. It's very possible that some pyramids were completed by the next ruler after the original pharaoh passed away. The Great Pyramid itself was likely built around 100 years after an earlier one, which was a step pyramid. It was kind of a prototype that helped Egyptian builders figure out how to go from stacked steps to smooth-sided giants. But how did they actually pull this off? Because stacking millions of giant rocks into a perfectly shaped pyramid is not something you do when you're bored. First thing we should consider, nobody had really done this before. The older pyramid was more like a giant stone staircase, so cool, but very different. The pyramids at Giza were a whole new level. That's like going from building a shed to suddenly constructing a skyscraper and somehow not messing it up. For one thing, ancient Egypt had it pretty good back then. Every year the Nile flooded, and when the water went away, it left behind super fertile soil. In other words, they had tons of food, more than enough to keep people alive and feed a massive workforce. That extra food powered the pyramid project. The rulers figured out how to organize farming really well. They took that extra food and used it to support thousands of workers. Now, speaking of workers, some people likely worked on the pyramids full-time. Others were farmers who helped out when they weren't busy in the fields. Some people probably paid their taxes by doing labor. Plus, researchers found notes that showed a lot of day-to-day planning. During the wet season, Egyptians used shallow boats to float heavy stones closer to the site instead of dragging everything across land. So, the river was handling a lot of the heavy lifting. The real headache was getting those massive stones up. You just can't lift a multi-ton rock over your head and hope for the best. The defeat would be crushing. The builders had to use ramps. But if you build one long straight ramp from the ground all the way to the top of the pyramid, that ramp would be so huge it'd be like another pyramid. Like, congrats, you built the wrong pyramid first. So because of that, people came up with other ideas. Maybe the ramp wrapped around the outside, spiraling up like a parking garage. Or maybe the ramp was hidden inside the pyramid, which sounds cool and mysterious, but there's not great proof for it yet. What helped a lot was a discovery of an old stone quarry called Hatnub from the same time period. Archaeologists found a super steep ramp system that everyone used to think was impossible. It had holes for wooden posts on the sides, and workers probably used ropes and sleds to drag huge stone blocks uphill. Just imagine a group of people hauling a sled while looping ropes around posts for extra leverage. It's like ancient gym bros doing leg day non-stop. If the pyramid builders used something like that, it means the ramps didn't need to be massive. They could be way shorter and steeper. In any case, the mystery of the pyramids is far from solved. Maybe one day, someone will discover the rest of the tale.
You may think we know the pyramids of Giza. 3 giant pyramids, 1 massive sphinx, and endless desert around them. And then researchers go and find something totally unexpected. Another sphinx buried under the sand. A team of Italian scientists believe this structure could be hidden beneath the Giza Plateau. And they also think the entire area may have a huge underground complex stretching beneath the pyramids themselves. This discovery started with radar scans and satellite images. Researchers studied the layout of the Giza Plateau very carefully. The Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre, and the Pyramid of Menkaure, and the famous Sphinx. That's when they noticed something strange. The lines connecting the pyramids and the Sphinx seemed to point toward another raised area nearby. That mound is huge, around 108 feet tall. That's the height of a 10-story building. It seems to be made mostly of hardened sand, and it's important, because carving a giant structure into bedrock would be much harder. There's another detail making this theory even more interesting. The famous Dream Stele, a giant stone slab in front of the Great Sphinx, shows not 1 sphinx, but 2. For a long time, people thought that was just symbolic artwork. But what if it shows something real? The idea is that ancient builders created 2 giant guardian statues, but one of them later disappeared under layers of sand. Researchers say that the geometry of the site makes this theory difficult to ignore. The alignment between the pyramids, the visible sphinx, and the hidden mound appears unusually precise. The patterns just line up too well to look random. Even if there's no second sphinx, it could point to hidden chambers, tunnels, or even an underground citadel. Right now, though, this is still a theory. No one has excavated the site yet, and many archaeologists remain skeptical. But the scans, the shapes underground, and the strange alignment patterns make people consider this idea seriously. Besides, the story gets even stranger. Ancient carvings near the Great Sphinx describe a bizarre moment from the life of Prince Thutmose IV. According to the inscriptions, the young prince fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx while it was still buried in sand. Then, in a dream, the giant statue supposedly spoke to him and promised him the throne of Egypt. But only if he cleared the sand away and uncovered it. That story was carved into stone thousands of years ago. Could it contain clues we've missed for centuries? To get more data, the team scanned the ground beneath the Great Sphinx, the nearby pyramids, and the area that connects the Sphinx to the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest pyramid at Giza. And according to the scans, strange structures may exist deep underground. vertical shafts, long horizontal tunnels, and branching passageways. Researchers think that some of these formations connect into a massive underground network stretching below the pyramids and the Sphinx. The coolest thing is that the underground patterns seem to be symmetrical. The hidden structures beneath the area mirror each other almost perfectly. That symmetry is one of the main reasons the researchers think this isn't some random geology. The theory itself didn't appear out of nowhere either. More than 10 years ago, Egyptologist Bassam el-Shamma also suggested that once a second Sphinx could have existed. He based this idea on ancient Egyptian records and myths describing lightning striking the Sphinx. He thought that those stories could actually refer to a real monument that no longer existed. It could vanish because of time, weather, or even ancient beliefs. Most Egyptologists don't accept this idea, and only a small group of people support it. After all, no excavations have confirmed the existence of a hidden Sphinx or underground city. But the radar scans, the underground patterns and ancient carvings, and the strange symmetry beneath Giza might mean that we still have no idea what's really buried under the pyramids. At this point, researchers are still waiting for permission from Egyptian authorities to study the mysterious mound more closely. At least we know much more about the Great Sphinx of Giza, one of the oldest and most mysterious monuments on Earth. The statue is gigantic. From its front paws to its tail, it's about 240 feet long, almost the length of a football field. It rises around 66 feet, about as tall as a 6-story building, and at its widest point, the body reaches over 60 feet across. To construct it, ancient builders didn't move giant blocks into place like they did with the pyramids. They actually cut the Sphinx straight out of the rock beneath the desert's surface. Over the centuries, wind, sand, and humidity slowly damaged the monument. Large parts of the Sphinx had to be repaired again and again. Workers added layers of limestone blocks around the base to stop the structure from crumbling. And then there's the missing nose, probably the most famous mystery. A lot of people believe Napoleon's soldiers blasted it off with cannons during the French campaign in Egypt, but that story isn't true. Drawings from before Napoleon even arrived already show the Sphinx without its nose. Interestingly, researchers who studied the face found marks suggesting someone deliberately broke the nose off with the help of such tools as rods or chisels. But nobody knows exactly who did it or why. Now, most people call the statue the Sphinx, but technically, that's not even correct. The creature from Greek mythology had the body of a lion, the head of a woman, and wings. But the one in Egypt looks different. It has a lion's body, a human head, and no wings at all. So technically, it belongs to a totally different category. Even its name changed over time. Ancient Egyptians didn't originally call it the Great Sphinx. Thousands of years ago, people linked it to powerful deities connected to the sun and the horizon. Later civilizations gave it completely different names, so the monument kept changing identities with time. Nobody truly knows who built it. A lot of experts believe Pharaoh Khafre ordered its construction around 2500 BCE because his pyramid and temples are nearby. Plus, the face of the Sphinx looks similar to the statues of him. But there's a problem. No inscription directly says he built it, so other researchers think someone else created it. Plus, archaeologists have found something else that makes the story even stranger. Near the Sphinx, they've uncovered abandoned tools, stone blocks, and even unfinished meals left behind by workers. It looked like people suddenly stopped working and walked away in a hurry. The workers themselves weren't starving slaves like many people imagine. Excavations showed they ate high-quality meat, beef, sheep, and goat. That kind of food was expensive in ancient Egypt, so the workers were likely skilled laborers with an important status. The Sphinx also looked completely different back then. Today, it has this faded sandy color, but thousands of years ago, it may have been covered in bright paint. Researchers found traces of red on its face and hints of blue and yellow on its headdress. Sadly, even restoration works may cause damage. During repairs in the early 20th century, parts of the Sphinx's headdress broke off. Later restoration attempts used materials that actually harmed the soft limestone underneath. At one point, a huge chunk crashed off the statue's shoulder. The Sphinx also once had a beard. And today, pieces of that beard are kept in museums in London and Cairo. But even here, researchers argue. Some experts believe the beard belonged to the original statue. Others think people added it centuries later during restoration projects. Despite its terrifying appearance, the Egyptian version of the Sphinx was actually seen as a protector. The evil, dangerous version most people know comes mainly from Greek mythology. Ancient Egyptians viewed their Sphinx very differently. To them, it represented power, protection, and divine authority.
It turns out that the Great Pyramid of Giza is even more advanced than we thought. It can handle earthquakes with magnitudes of at least 6.8, and that's a big one. During powerful quakes, while nearby buildings were collapsing to the ground in ruins, the pyramid just absorbed the shaking and stayed standing. Was there a secret mechanism that helped it? More than 4,500 years ago, ancient Egyptians built one of the heaviest structures in human history, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Pharaoh Khufu ordered its construction around 2500 BCE, and it took about 26 years to finish. Workers dragged and stacked more than 2.3 million stone blocks, and some of them weighed several tons each. The finished pyramid was about 480 feet tall. It's just a bit lower than the Ritz Tower in Manhattan, which reaches 541 feet. But that might not even be the most shocking part. The pyramid was likely built to handle earthquakes. Recently, researchers from Egypt and Japan decided to study how vibrations move through the pyramid. Now, the pyramid is over 4,600 years old, so they didn't want to shake it on purpose and risk damaging it. But they still managed to test about 40 different spots inside and around the giant structure with the help of special equipment called highly sensitive accelerometers. Their tools measured tiny waves moving through stone. Ultimately, it could help them figure out what would happen if the ground started shaking. It turns out that instead of concentrating all the force of vibrations in one place, the pyramid spreads the energy through the structure. In simple words, it behaves like a giant shock absorber. The vibrations weaken while moving through the pyramid, instead of building up and cracking it apart. Egypt has been shaken by earthquakes many times over thousands of years. Some of them were strong enough to wreck entire parts of Cairo. And while some nearby buildings were badly damaged or completely destroyed, the Great Pyramid is still standing. Scientists say that the structure is incredibly balanced. The huge weight is distributed so evenly that the pyramid remains stable even when the ground moves underneath it. The shape helps too. A pyramid pushes weight downward and outward, and this makes it harder for its parts to collapse inward. For example, in 1992, a massive earthquake hit Egypt. It had a magnitude of 5.9, and its epicenter was about 20 miles southwest of Cairo. It damaged or destroyed more than 129,000 buildings. Old tombs near the Valley of the Kings had to be reinforced so they wouldn't collapse. But the Great Pyramid didn't really care, having lost just one stone. One big reason is the pyramid's design. Its base is enormous, more than 755 feet wide. That wide bottom helps spread out force and keeps the structure stable during shaking. The pyramid is also extremely symmetrical. This helps balance pressure from all sides. Plus, underneath, there's solid bedrock that acts like a super strong foundation. Then, there are the blocks themselves. Ancient builders used huge limestone blocks that lock together like giant puzzle pieces. During an earthquake, such a structure can absorb and spread vibrations. It won't crack apart right away. The Great Pyramid wasn't Egypt's first attempt at pyramid building. Earlier rulers had already been experimenting for many generations. For example, more than 100 years before Khufu, Egyptians built the step pyramid at Saqqara. Instead of having smooth sides, it looked like giant stone stairs. Later, Khufu's father started building larger pyramids with smooth outer sides, much closer to the famous pyramids we know today. Over time, Egyptian builders kept learning what worked and what failed. Yep, some later pyramids tried cheap shortcuts. One pyramid used part of a natural hill to save materials. But that made the structure less stable because fewer blocks locked together. Another pyramid, called the Black Pyramid, was built mostly from mud bricks. True, it was cheaper, but also much weaker. No wonder it aged horribly. Rain and erosion slowly destroyed the structure. Some of those later pyramids eventually collapsed completely. But let's get back to the Great Pyramid and its earthquake survival skills. Scientists actually went inside it and measured its vibrations. They studied places like the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, underground tunnels, and hidden rooms above the King's burial chamber. They found out that the entire pyramid vibrated almost perfectly evenly from one stone block to another. It means that the whole construction moves together as one giant object instead of shaking apart in different directions. And that's the most important thing during an earthquake. Now, the ground around the pyramid vibrates very differently, at a much lower frequency. So, when the earth shakes, the pyramid doesn't fully sync up with those dangerous vibrations. And that helps reduce the force moving through the structure. Imagine pushing someone on a swing. If your timing matches the swing, it goes higher and higher. But if the timing is off, the movement weakens. The pyramid seems to work the same way with earthquakes. Scientists also discovered something else inside the structure. Above the King's Chamber, there are several small relieving chambers. And no, they aren't bathrooms. Before, many people thought that they only help support the weight of the ceiling. But now, researchers believe that those chambers may also help weaken earthquake vibrations before they reach the most important inner rooms. In other words, the pyramid must be redirecting and softening shock waves inside itself. Overall, the pyramids are much more amazing than we think. They aren't simply giant tombs built by slaves. Archaeologists found entire workers' villages near the pyramids. The builders had houses, food, medical care, and organized work teams. They were skilled laborers and got paid for their work. They needed those skills and a lot of strength. After all, some of the limestone and granite blocks weighed 80 tons. That's heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck. And they came from quarries miles away. So, how did the workers move them? Well, one theory claims that they used wooden sleds moving on wet sand. Or probably there were special lubricated paths. So far, we haven't figured this mystery out yet. The pyramids also look completely different back then. Today, they look kind of rough and dusty. But originally, they were covered in smooth white limestone. It was polished so brightly that the sunlight reflected off the pyramids like mirrors. Inside the Great Pyramid, the temperature stays close to 68 degrees Fahrenheit almost all the time, even when the desert outside gets scorching hot during the day and freezing at night. The massive stone walls work like giant insulation. The Great Pyramid also lines up almost perfectly with north, south, east, and west. That means the ancient Egyptians understood astronomy better than most people think. The pyramid might have even been an observatory, not just a tomb. Now, there's another mystery of the Great Pyramid: hidden chambers. Using thermal cameras and muon radiography, researchers have detected empty spaces inside the pyramid. But we can't reach them yet, so no one knows what's in there. Of course, there are theories: secret rooms, lost knowledge, hidden chambers, or something that could change how we see the pyramid completely. Because the strange part is, even though the pyramids are supposed to be tombs, no one has ever found a mummy inside the Great Pyramid. The whole complex is huge. Giza isn't just 3 pyramids. There are smaller satellite pyramids, temples, worker villages, and long walkways connecting everything. The whole area shows how much planning went into these structures and how important they were to the ancient Egyptians. And the math involved is cool too. The Great Pyramid's base covers about 13 acres, and if you take the perimeter of the pyramid and divide it by the height, you'll get roughly 3.1416. That's pi. The ancient Egyptians managed to do it without modern tools, and scientists still don't understand how. Then there's the alignment with the stars. Some researchers have proposed that the 3 main pyramids at Giza line up with the 3 stars in Orion's belt. If it's true, that might not be an accident. The ancient Egyptians believed that their pharaoh's souls would rise to the sky through that constellation. Wow! Scientists have found a lost city beneath Egypt's pyramids. And it's incredibly large, bigger than the biggest target you can imagine. Underground chambers, passageways, and vertical structures. Scientists have no idea what purposes they serve. But let's start from the very beginning. Italian and Scottish scientists studying the Pyramid of Khafra discovered something that looked like secret tunnels under 3 pyramids. This find might change what we know about ancient Egypt. The expedition, called the Khafra Project, was led by Corrado Malunga from Pisa, Italy, and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde, Scotland. Their mission was to focus on exploring Khafra's pyramid, the second largest on the Giza Plateau. Scientists uncovered a massive structure beneath the Pyramid of Khafra. Could it be an ancient Egyptian underground city? The experts analyzed the data they had and came to the conclusion that 8 large vertical structures could be hiding beneath, possibly wells or shafts. They extend a staggering 6,500 feet across. Imagine placing 2.5 Burj Khalifas on the ground, one after another, and you get the sheer size of this find. These shafts also plunge nearly 2,000 feet underground. Some of the deepest underground stations in the world are located at a mere 380 feet underground or so. These cylindrical shafts are surrounded by spiral paths. Picture some old Gothic castle. They're connected to 2 giant, weirdly shaped chambers. Are those cubes? Or possibly bowls? Each of these chambers is likely more than 260 feet across. Now, even though we know about the structures now, no one has figured out their original purpose yet. Want to hear something even more shocking? Okay then. The team is almost sure that similar access points can be found under all 3 pyramids. In other words, all of them might be linked by a hidden system of underground tunnels, chambers, and passages. Even deeper, about 4,000 feet under the surface, there might be more unknown structures. And doesn't it add to the mystery? But the coolest news is that, according to some team members, these hidden structures near Giza pyramids could align with the legendary Halls of Amenti. In ancient Egyptian mythology, it's a place where people are believed to arrive when they're close to the end of their days. There, they are said to take a 3-day-long trial, facing their biggest fears. Now, how did scientists even discover these hidden spaces? To uncover them, researchers used 2 satellites positioned 420 miles above Earth. They sent radar signals to the Giza Plateau, and these signals generated detailed images, which were later compiled into a 3D model of the underground layout, including the newly detected shafts. Then, using synthetic aperture radar or SAR technology, which is a type of radar that can penetrate through stone, the team also spotted 5 small room-like structures hidden deep within the pyramid. One of these chambers contained a sarcophagus, which was once thought to be the tomb of Pharaoh Khafra. But now, scientists believe this was a mistake. The true burial site is likely to be elsewhere. In any case, these 5 hidden rooms were completely unknown before the scans. They seem to be arranged in the center of the pyramid and are linked to underground pathways leading somewhere below the structure. There's an opinion that these tunnels could lead to more hidden chambers and wells. Some of them might be around 4,500 years old. Wow! What if they help us solve ancient civilization mysteries? Preliminary data suggests that all this underground space can be much more than a few empty chambers. There might be many more hidden structures near the Giza pyramids. How come? Well, the thing is, the structure appears to include hollowed-out sections with spiral pathways leading even deeper underground. Refining the images hinting at this could reveal an extensive subterranean network. It might be a whole city hidden under the surface. Now, despite the excitement surrounding these findings, there are also a lot of people who don't believe in the existence of the underground city. They're skeptical about the archaeological discovery in Egypt due to the lack of peer-reviewed verification. That's why several archaeologists and radar experts have challenged the validity of the claims. They've explained that the technology used to make the discovery may not be advanced enough to produce such detailed underground imagery. According to them, the 5 smaller chambers found near the surface could be natural formations, since the area had had sacred significance long before the construction of the pyramids. Some experts have even dismissed the use of radar methods in this context altogether. They call these methods scientifically unproven and question their accuracy. The discovery has also reignited discussions about ancient Egyptian myths and the possibility of hidden texts lying somewhere beneath the Giza pyramids. The layout of the newly detected underground chambers shares similarities with mythological accounts of the Hall of Records, a rumored chamber that could preserve early Egyptian wisdom. If confirmed, these findings could significantly reshape the understanding of Egypt's sacred topography. Plus, this lost city beneath Egypt's pyramid could become physical evidence of previously unknown underground structures. That's why the Khafra project is super eager to begin excavating to confirm their findings. But getting approval from Egyptian authorities is a challenging process. The discoveries still need to undergo peer review before they are accepted by the academic community. By the way, this recent archaeological discovery in Egypt comes on the heels of another discovery involving a weird structure beneath the Royal Giza Cemetery, which researchers believe is unnatural in origin. Archaeologists used remote sensing techniques and uncovered a mysterious L-shaped structure underground in the Western Cemetery of Giza. This area is known to house burials of royal family members and high-ranking officials. Many of the tombs in the cemetery have above-ground mastabas, rectangular stone or mud brick structures with flat roofs. But there is an area in the center of the cemetery where there are no above-ground structures. To investigate this unexplored region, the team used electrical resistive tomography and ground-penetrating radar. ERT works by sending electrical currents into the ground and measuring the resistance to detect remains. As for GPR, it sends radar into the ground and maps the structures based on the radar's return. The team found an anomaly about 6.5 feet beneath the surface. It appeared to be an L-shaped structure measuring at least 33 feet in length. The readings suggested that the structure had been backfilled with sand after its construction. This made the team hypothesize that it could be a mix of sand and gravel, or possibly an air void. This anomaly was classified as a highly resistive structure, which meant it didn't occur naturally. Motoyuki Sato, the study's lead author and professor at Tohoku University in Japan, claims that the structure is not a natural formation due to its sharp shape. Another weird thing about ancient Egyptian pyramids is that historians have long believed that they were built primarily for royals and high-status individuals who had the wealth and power to create such massive structures. However, new research from the archaeological site of Tombos in modern-day Sudan challenges this assumption. The thing is, Tombos' pyramid may have served as burial sites for low-status workers as well as elites. The hard-working members of ancient communities may have found their last resting place in some of the most visible monuments, including the pyramids. Located along the Nile River in the ancient region of Nubia, Tombos became part of Egypt after its conquest of the area around 1400 BCE. That's when Egypt established the site to strengthen its colonial control. Workers at Tombos built pyramids, but those were much more modest than the famous pyramids of Giza. The research team reanalyzed 110 human skeletons from Tombos, originally studied in 2012. In particular, they examined the entheses, the areas where tendons and ligaments attach to bones. Such an analysis can give us insights into the amount of physical labor a person performed. When someone does hard labor, their bones often develop distinct crests and ridges at these attachment points due to the stress on the tendons and ligaments. And while some skeletons showed little change in their entheses, suggesting they belonged to individuals from the upper classes, others showed more serious changes. It means they belong to lower-class workers. This finding can totally challenge our earlier understanding of pyramid burials, especially the idea that only elites were buried in the pyramids, because the pyramids themselves were designed for the elite. This recent research may prove that lower-class workers may have found their final resting place in these monumental structures too.